Now, Jonathan is listening in Cairo, and he sends the following. I don't know if you've read the recent article in the New Statesman. He doesn't mean the one I quoted earlier. It shows that in 1976, an English writer described Saddam as, quotes, perhaps the first visionary Arab statesman since Nasser, unquote, and hailed the, quote, fierce revolutionary ideology, unquote, of a state that was the, quote, first oil-producing government to opt for 100% nationalization, unquote. That English writer said, quote, Iraq is dedicated to the idea of a single socialist Arab nation from Gibraltar to the Indian Ocean, the original Ba'athist dream, unquotes. And it describes someone whom the writer met on the River Tigris who had been tortured by the British, by the Qasim's men, that's the leader overthrown by the Ba'ath, and by Saddam's men, but who admired Saddam because, quote, he has made us strong and respected, unquotes. And at the end, the English writer said of Saddam, quote, make a note of his name, unquote. Ironic, isn't it? Why is it ironic, dear listener? Because the English writer in question was one Christopher Hitchens. You couldn't make it up. Hypocritians on Saddam. This was brought to the world's attention, by the way, by my comrade Ian Burchell, and is now in the New Statesman and will be circulating the world. Chris Hitchens, who'd have thought it?
George Galloway on Talk Sport.
10 minutes, George Galloway.
Crazed fabrications. Johns Hopkins University and The Lancet, the journal of the British Medical Association,
check it
are
out.
engaged in crazed fabrications.
Politicized fabrications.
Isn't that, no, crazed fabrications, you said.
Both.
Isn't crazed, well, is there anybody really in this hall who believes that really?
We don't know what you're supposed to believe yet.
You think that the academics from one of the world's finest universities in your own country are crazed fabricators? You think that the Lancet, the journal of the British Medical Association, are crazed fabricators? I mean, how far has this neocon rot seeped into your souls? How far?
Get it.
Now, I'm going to have to deal with this hypocrite Hitchens. He talks about the death of soldiers in an occupation army at the hands of those resisting them. He supported the Algerian resistance in its bitter battle against French occupation, which cost 1 million lives. And he supported the FLN, who conducted the most bitter, unremitting, unrelenting military struggle, which would today be described, and was then by the French described, as terrorist. And when Ahmed Ben Bella, the leader of the Algerian Revolution, was asked why he was placing bombs in baby carriages and leaving them in the souk to explode amongst the French forces and their collaborators, he answered, if the French will give us some of their helicopters, some of their aeroplanes, we will give them our baby carriages. Isn't that the same situation today? That Mr. Hitchens' friends are the ones with all the tomahawks, all the Apaches. Isn't it odd that they should choose as the names of their weapons the totems of the Native American population that they remorselessly massacred in centuries gone by? The Iraqi people have only themselves with which to fight this foreign occupation. This hypocrite crying tears for the American army in Iraq supported the struggle of the Vietnamese people from the first to the last, as they killed 58,000 American soldiers in Vietnam. He opposed the American war in Vietnam and supported those fighting against it. Today, he supports the American occupation of Iraq and seeks to slander those fighting against it. Now, there are al-Qaeda elements in Iraq. Whose fault is that? Who brought them there? How did they end up in Iraq? There were no al-Qaeda in Iraq before Bush and Blair attacked it. And now every Islamist in the world is either on his way or dreaming of being on his way, descending like spores of anthrax on the gaping wounds in Iraq created by your war. And I'll tell you what, they'll then spill around the world, spreading their jihad exactly as his new, or rather old, friends in Afghanistan did. The Arab Afghans who were sent by the American administration to Afghanistan in the 1980s became al-Qaeda in the 1990s and into the 21st century. So, Mr. Hitchens' policy has succeeded in making 10,000 new bin Ladens. He and his friends
Sorry about that.
have deepened,
I didn't mean to do it.
have deepened the swamp
Really didn't mean
of
to do
hatred out of which these Islamist fundamentalists are climbing. You see, well, somebody laughs. You may think that those aeroplanes in this city on 9/11 came out of a clear blue sky. I believe they emerged out of a swamp of hatred created by us. I believe I believe
Be quiet.
that by their unending, bottomless, and total support for General Sharon's crimes against the Palestinian people, the United States, I don't think your new friends are quite as keen on the Palestinians as you once were, Christopher. I believe that by propping up the puppet presidents and the corrupt kings who rule the Muslim world almost without exception from one end to the other, Western policy has created this swamp of hatred against us. And it won't matter. It won't matter how many fly swats we invest in, how many Patriot Acts we pass, how many anti-terrorist measures we pass. If you live beside a swamp, no amount of fly swats will protect you from the monsters who will come out of that swamp. We have to drain that swamp by stopping that support for Sharon's Israel, his apartheid wall, his crimes against the Palestinian people. We have to stop. You see, I'll tell you, there's not many supporters of the Palestinians in your ranks tonight, Mr. Hitchens. I think unless we stop propping up these dictators in the Muslim world, none of whom would last 5 minutes if it were not for the military, political and financial support of countries like yours and mine, unless we stop invading and occupying Arab and Muslim countries, then we will be forced to endure the atrocities that took place in New York on 9/11 and in London on 7/7 over and over again. So if I can't reach your heart, let me at least reach your head in your own interests.
Try the wallet.
In America's own interests. Reverse your policy towards Israel and Palestine. Reverse your policy towards dictators in the Muslim world. Reverse your policy towards war and occupation. And we can all be safer.
Christopher Hitchens, 5.
But
George Galloway.
you see, but you opposed the war in 1991 in the full knowledge of what had happened at Halabja just 3 years before. You're the one who went on television denouncing President Bush for his plan to invade and destroy the regime of Saddam Hussein. You are the one who did it. I saw you with my own eyes.
Yes, I was
I
there
saw
too.
your lips moving.
I was there too.
I saw the words tumble out.
Yeah.
Keep your wig on, you told Heston. Name 4 countries around the country of Iraq that you're so keen to attack. You were in completely full knowledge, even better knowledge, because it was even fresher, in 1991, the nature of the Saddam regime. But you were against the invasion of Iraq in 1991, presumably because you calculated that a tin-pot dictatorship in one country in the Arab world was one thing. Unleashing the right of big superpowers to invade and occupy other people's countries without legal authority, without judicial permission of the authorities, political and legal, in the world, was an even bigger danger. Even bigger danger. I was a small fry in 1991. Nobody in America was watching me on television as I was watching you on television in America and cheering you for your foresightedness, for your wisdom, for your subtlety in knowing that sometimes in life you have to choose between bad and badder. Sometimes in life you have to choose between evil and more evil. That's what you did in 1991. The only difference between us is that on the road somewhere, Damascus,
I would say, yeah.
I don't know where,
Be careful.
I don't know what it was, whether it was Vanity Fair or whether it was the lucrative contracts that you've landed since, but somehow you decided in 2003, maybe it was the whiskey, somehow you decided in 2003 to take a line that was the complete opposite of the line you used to take. Now you want us to gloss over that point.
No, not at all.
You say, well, yes, you did. You said, I can't understand why so much time was devoted to this point. Were you lying then in 91, or are you lying now?
Please.
Were you wrong in 91, or are you wrong now? If you were wrong in 91, how should we believe you're right now in 2005? If you're capable of such drastic, dramatic, erratic swings from being in favor of a devastating war, to being against a devastating war, to being in favor of the liberation struggle in Algeria and Vietnam and Ireland, but against the liberation struggle now in Palestine and Iraq. If you're capable of such dramatic, almost, if I can use the word that you used earlier, crazed shifts of opinion, how can anybody take you seriously?
Well,